Good morning. I'm Jamie Montgomery, and welcome to the Montgomery Summit. This morning we have a spotlight on ASAPP, and we're pleased to have the founder and CEO, Gustavo Sapoznik, here, and hosted by John Doerr. Let me just introduce them. Gustavo is the CEO of ASAPP, has a mission to build machine learning products to solve some of the world's largest and most complex problems. ASAP's products are deployed at Fortune 500 enterprises, delivering automation and work simplification at scale and driving critical business outcomes. The ASAP team includes some of the foremost machine learning researchers who are applying their pioneering work to solve real-world problems today. Outside of work, he's pursued a lifelong love of classical music, enjoys skiing and aviation in his spare time. Now, we're very fortunate today to have John Doerr with us. John is an engineer, acclaimed venture capitalist, and chairman of Kleiner Perkins. For over 40 years, John has served entrepreneurs with ingenuity and optimism, bringing ideas worth spreading to disruptive leaders and teams. Kleiner is one of Silicon Valley's most storied firms, having gone back to Amazon, AOL, Compaq, Electronic Arts, Google, Netscape, and Twitter. John was an original investor and board member at both Google and Amazon, helping to create over 1 million jobs in 2 of the world's most valuable companies. He's passionate about helping entrepreneurs reimagine the future, from healthcare transformation to machine learning. Outside of Kleiner, John works with social entrepreneurs for change in climate crisis, public education, and global poverty. John authored in 2018 Measure What Matters, which became not only a best-selling book, but also a cult handbook for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists for setting and achieving audacious goals. Through his book and his platform, whatmatters.com, he shares valuable stories and lessons from innovators. We're very fortunate to have them today. Thank you, John. Thank you, Gustavo. And we're looking forward to this great discussion. I have the honor of asking the first question for both of you. AI is an interesting technology, but what do you envision being the most impactful real-world applications of AI?
Gustavo?
I was going to let you go first.
All right. Well, I'll start out. Jamie, thank you for having us here and for that really generous introduction. Even my mother's blushing right now. So, look, this is important. AI is the most important technology of our lifetimes. It's profoundly important. It's going to accelerate our ability to invent, to communicate, to create, to prosper. And I don't feel I can imagine the most important uses of it. I'll hit on a few that I think are important, but I wouldn't venture to say they're the most important of them. You can see in, for example, the latest announcement from DeepMind that they've cracked the protein folding problem. If we can accurately predict how proteins will form shapes, we can accelerate the development of drug discovery profoundly. And Deme Habis, who is the founder of the DeepMind operation at Alphabet, would say it will change everything, quite literally. Pulling in from that frontier, I think that an area of profound impact will be healthcare. Healthcare, because it cuts so deep, because it's such a large part of the worldwide economy, because healthcare spans the continuum from a whole range of business processes and customer interactions to diagnosis and imaging. Those are the fields where I look for AI to make a big difference, but in no field more urgently than the one that Gustavo is pioneering. So let me turn it over to him.
Thank you, John. I wholeheartedly agree with those areas of impact that you mentioned. I think over time, the impact of the technology will certainly be tremendous. I think about it from a very pragmatic perspective. If I look at how the world runs, it doesn't require a great amount of creativity to come up with ways in which the world is broken and fundamentally inefficient, and where there's enormous opportunities to increase productivity. And in that category, I can think of no more exciting opportunity than increasing human productivity. I think what makes the world work is overwhelmingly people. And historically, we've built technology to make jobs easier, make access to information, data more accessible, but we haven't really pushed the envelope in terms of building technology that creates a symbiosis with humans and helps them do their jobs in a way more productive way. And I think that that's going to be something very exciting.
So Gustavo, let's stay on that theme for a moment. Tell us some more specifics of how you see AI augmenting people.
Yeah, it really starts with the purpose of why we started ASAPP. We landed in this problem of customer experience because it was big, broken, and data rich, and that was really the three attributes that we were looking for. And part of what makes it gigantic is that the number of people that work in this problem is one of the largest concentrations of labor in the world. And when you look again at the technology that's been built to make them better, is hard to find any. It's generally non-existent. In fact, if you think about your experiences when you get to interact with a large enterprise, it seems like the majority of investments over the last 2 decades or so have been, how do we keep people from actually interacting with us? How do we deflect them away? How we build automation systems that prevent this from escalating to a human, yet the humans represent 90+% of the economic size and opportunity in this problem. So when we looked at that broken picture, we said part of the solution is really making those people better, making their jobs more efficient and therefore more sustainable. And the premise of augmenting jobs became really a purpose that drew us quite inspired in terms of how to solve this problem.
So can we talk, Gustavo, about your team, how it is you've assembled this team of people? Because I'm fond of saying ideas are easy, but it's execution that's everything. Let's trade notes, I guess, about teams and what makes teams work.
Yeah, I think the fundamental recognition for us was that everything we do is a result of the people we have. If we were in the farming business, sure, you need farmers, but ultimately how much land do you have really will determine your ability to succeed. In our case, is really what's in my head, what's in my colleagues' heads, and our ability to align our heads to the shared objectives that we have. So if you start by recognizing that everything we do is a result of the people we have, then who those people are and how do you organize as a team and the culture you create really become the primary imperatives. More specifically to the field of artificial intelligence, it turns out that the community that is at the top of that field that is making meaningful fundamental advances is rather small. And we've been very laser focused from early days when we recognized that our product vision was so ambitious and we needed to make fundamental advances in the field and really trying to attract the best and brightest folks. And I think part of the reason we've succeeded is a question of impact. I think the opportunity to be early in an organization that has the ambition of making the world more productive by making people better is something that resonates with people. But I wanted to ask you back another question, and it relates to you having had the unique opportunity to work with some of the most exciting companies, in not just in the technology business, but of all times. And what was it about ASAPP that got you excited about our mission?
Well, I remember first meeting you, Gustavo, and I'd like to share with the conference that one of my threshold questions early on is, would I mind getting into trouble with a particular entrepreneur, be it Jeff Bezos or Larry Page and Sergey Brin or others? And Gustavo friends possessed a kind of intensity and also compassion, a kind of caring. He'd been caring for his mom who was ill with cancer and really cared about making the world a better place. and and he fit a set of 5 criteria that I saw in Google, that I saw in Amazon, and I call these the 5 key success factors for disruptive ventures. The first of those is technical excellence. The second is an outstanding team. The third is strategic focus on either a large existing marketplace or a rapidly growing new one. The fourth is a reasonable approach to financing the company. And the fifth is a sense of urgency. And of course, at the beginning, few ventures possess all 5 of those key factors. And so there's judgment involved in whether or not they will attain those. But I just want to recite the 5 again for ASAPP, because Gustavo was clearly committed to technical excellence. And I don't mean published papers or PhDs, but the attitude that you're going to attract and retain and grow the best talent to solve the problems your business addresses. And Gustavo, uniquely among new ventures, was successful at recruiting AI talent from Alphabet Google, where, in my view, they have some of the best in the world. And to this day, I think ASAPP is really distinguished by its technical efforts. But technology alone won't solve the problems. And Gustavo at the time really didn't possess a team. Now he's grown one, and it's world-class, simply put. He's had a strategic focus from the beginning on large unserved market needs. I remember us talking about Comcast, Gustavo, and how much they'd budgeted to spend to solve their customer experience problems, which are formidable. And then you set out to raise money as you reduce risks, but through all that possessed this sense of urgency. So you scored 4 out of 5, and you've grown the team to meet this 5th distinguishing characteristic. And my hat's really off to you. I think ASAPP is going to be an extraordinarily important and special kind of company. I do want to, though, turn to customer experience, because how did you pick that as the first field to work in?
Yeah, serendipity. When we started ASAPP, the founding idea was really building machine learning products to solve real world problems, which sounds cool, but doesn't really prescribe what it is you're going to go out and do. And the first task then became for us to really think, well, what makes a real world problem interesting or worth solving for us? And after some thought, we decided it needs to be economically gigantic. We only want to focus on very large problems. It needs to have systemic inefficiency or be very broken. And it needs to have large amounts of data so that we could do something from a machine learning perspective with that data. And I was spending a couple months thinking about different problems that had those 3 attributes. And one day my internet stopped working. I picked up the phone, I called my cable company, and I spent almost 3 hours on the phone with them, which was pretty darn frustrating.
Was Comcast, may I ask?
I shall not name names for the sake of potential or current customers that might or might not be involved.
But for the record, it was not Comcast.
It was not Comcast. And well, I was pretty frustrated, and it occurred to me that if I'm frustrated, they must be frustrated too, because they had to pay someone to be on the phone with me for 3 hours. And I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that the world spends hundreds of billions of dollars at this problem based on the 12 to 15 million jobs that do it. The technology, like I said, that's been built to solve this problem has always been centered on keeping people away from the organization instead of empowering those who are in the organization to be enabled to successfully help people. And then the data was actually not only abundant, but from an AI perspective, really as interesting as data gets, because you had this gigantic corpus of dialogue data that was highly context specific to the organization that you were interacting with. And it turns out that why that's important is we humans are excellent language disambiguation machines. Computers are not so good. So if you and I are walking down a park and you say, hey, John, look, that's a beautiful plant, before you move your head and see what it is that I'm talking about, you know what it is. A computer, or if you're talking to Siri or Alexa, might not know if you're referencing a factory plant, a nuclear plant, or a tree plant. But when you narrow the universe from the general to a miniature version of the universe that just consists of individual A, interacting with company B, then you have a lot of context about what the nature of those interactions is going to be.
Fair enough. Really very good points. So customer experience is a really attractive and large space to work in. Where should we go now, Gustavo? What's on your mind?
Well, on that topic, I think an interesting observation is that this has been a big problem for quite some time. In fact, the incumbency of vendors that serve the space have mostly been established over the last 20 to 30 years. And in startup world and in the world of starting ambitious new technology companies, often you hear the expression of the first mover advantage. I think ASAPP in some way has the last mover advantage, because we saw this very broken problem where people have been banging their heads against the wall for a couple decades without really solving, and we got to come in with a fresh perspective. Now, I would argue that Google had a similar, perhaps, last mover advantage in the sense that it was a crowded space. There were plenty of search engines, and they showed up last. So, what thoughts do you have and perspectives on the benefit or not of being a first mover versus a last mover?
Well, you can be a first mover in a new market, and that's attractive. But I've always found it a faster road to prosperity to be a last mover or late mover in a large established market that you disrupt. So Google, for example, was a first, well, Amazon is the classic example of a company that was a last mover in disrupting commerce. But the Google story, I think, is more fascinating, and I'll shamelessly plug this book, Measure What Matters, where I tell the story of my first meeting with the Google co-founders. Larry Page and Sergey Brin came into my office with a business plan. It was a deck. It was almost embarrassingly short. It was 18 pages. Only 2 of them had numbers on them. So I really couldn't get a very clear idea from the plan how big Larry and Sergey thought their business could be. So I asked, and Larry Page, without missing a beat, said 10 billion. I said, 10 billion, surely you mean market cap. And he said, no, I mean revenues, John. Search is badly broken today. And I just can imagine that it gets way more personal and useful and effective at finding and indeed anticipating at what you want to learn and discover. So Google was the 18th search engine, and they had a proprietary, really differentiated technology in the way that ASAPP does. And that is that instead of relying on keywords in pages, as you know, they would rank search results based on how many other pages pointed to the relevant page. And this was such an improvement that when they introduced, with no marketing, their 18th for the industry search engine, they operated it out of their dorm room at Stanford. There was no Amazon Web Services, and it brought the Stanford network to its knees. And so the administrators on the campus were throwing the guys out of their offices to their first paid for office, which was a garage owned by Susan Wojcicki, which is where I first met them. And then they pretty quickly grew out of that to offices above the ice cream parlor on University Avenue in Palo Alto. The moral of this story is, I think if you bring real differentiation, real unique capability to a large market, you'll have to fight incumbents. But the advantage is these incumbents are usually pretty slow moving. And so that 5th point in my rubric, the ability to move with a real sense of urgency, is an advantage. I know we've got about 10 minutes or so to go. I'd like to open this up as Gustavo and I are talking to questions from the audience, and you can type those in somewhere, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Well, while those questions get populated, I think when we talk about artificial intelligence, there's a lot of buzz, and the moniker gets used and abused, and there's the gamut ranges: killer robots, to a more sensible concern, which is really the impact on jobs. I have a strong perspective on that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think it would do to the labor markets.
I think we've seen this this kind of technology innovation replaces jobs. It creates other newer, better opportunities, and so I'm very optimistic that this technology, artificial intelligence, is going to lead to prosperity and better work, less drudge work. It is fundamentally a human empowering technology.
Yeah, I agree. I think that from a technical perspective, there's always this, with any effort to build fully autonomous systems, there's this last mile issue that gets very, very tricky to solve. And part of the approach that we've taken in augmenting people, making people better, is if you think of a human that has a totality of workflows, how do we take some of those workflows away? How can we augment some of them away? And what's pretty neat is at some of our customers where you have a contact center agent that does 100 things, we managed to take about 80% of those tasks away from them. And I think about it in a pretty clever, or not clever, cute way, is if you think of a FedEx driver that needs to make 100 deliveries on a day, you now have a system that can make 80 of those deliveries for the driver. Now the driver's still there supervising that those 80 deliveries are done accurately, and now they need to do the 20 hardest that the system can really do. But when you took 80 away, you can load that FedEx delivery driver with a lot more capacity. And that's really the symbiosis of humans and machine that we think is going to be enabled by creating software that makes people better. And I think that's the implication on job markets is, as we increase productivity, a lot of these jobs become more sustainable. Like that FedEx driver that can now do 5x or 10x the number of deliveries because he's being assisted, I think becomes a very integral part of the economy.
So the questions are pouring in, Gustavo. I'm going to ask them quickly and press you for quick responses. But the first question, I want to ask you what I asked Larry Page. How big is ASAPP going to get? What's the size of the opportunity in numbers?
In the customer experience opportunity alone, the estimates range on size that the total spend is between $300 and $700 billion per year. I think it's probably closer to 600 billion. And of those 600 billion, 90% roughly is people, labor. If you build a system that makes 80% of that labor automated now, I think that is a gigantic, much bigger than $10 billion opportunity.
You said 500 billion per year?
Yeah.
Okay, so just for the record, that is 50 times bigger than the answer Larry Page gave me. That's big. Here's another question from Scott Newberger. How does ASAPP compare to Medallia? Why is it better?
Well, we're very different. Medallia does NPS surveys. So usually if you have an interaction with a company and you end that interaction, you get an email that says, how was this experience? And you complete that survey, you're using technology like Medallia or Qualtrics to complete that survey. We actually find that only a small percentage of interactions result with people wanting to spend the time in completing those surveys. So we listen to every single conversation, and based on what that conversation was in real time, we make a prediction of what the customer satisfaction score was going to be, so we don't burden you with having to ask customers questions. But that's really less than 1% of what ASAPP does. Most of what ASAPP does is really, one, enable that conversation to take place between you and the organization, allow it to be seamlessly persistent across all channels, so you can move from being on the phone with a company to messaging that company, and everything you said on that phone call is now transcribed and part of that messaging thread. And then the majority of the work is that human on the other side that's costing companies billions and billions of dollars is making that human a lot more productive.
Hey, Gustavo, two people are asking this question. What does your roadmap look like beyond customer service? Where are you likely to go? Well, actually, I'm going to refine that a bit. what sectors for customer service, and then what beyond customer service?
Yeah, I think you touched on urgency, and I want to add the word focus to urgency. So a combination of focus and urgency has us exclusively focused on serving the large enterprises in the world, who each have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of agents, tens of millions of customers each, and they spend all well over $1 billion per year individually. So we're very laser focused on solving that problem for that constituency for the time being. Now, I do hope this is my last job, so hopefully I'm doing this 30 years from now. And that means that we at some point picked up problem number 2, and hopefully at some point problem number 3. And I think what's consistent across whatever the net new problems turn out to be is this idea of big, broken, data-rich problems, where we can leverage everything we do from an AI research perspective into building fundamental solutions that automate and augment what humans are doing. So you touched on healthcare. I'm very interested in that, and maybe one day that will become an additional area of focus for a company.
How, Gustavo, are you and ASAPP going to use AI responsibly and ethically to revolutionize customer service?
Absolutely.
What are the ethical and responsible demands of this new technology in your view?
Yeah, I think it's a topic that gets a lot of anxiety from some folks. Reality is the sophistication of most machine learning capabilities is really, really good for doing really, really narrow tasks. So the technology doesn't present a risk in and of itself. It's really how do you apply it and how do you build products that leverage that capability. So I think the ethical questions really related to the type of product vision that one has in terms of solving a particular problem. And like I said, our product vision and purpose is to build technology that makes people better at what they do and more productive. And I think I'm fully satisfied by all the ethical considerations that come with that approach.
Gustavo, many in our audience are investors, they're technologists. What do you know that perhaps they don't, or how do you see the world differently that would be useful for our audience at this conference?
I would obsessively focus as an investor into the talent that companies in this space have. And I'm speaking about artificial intelligence. The moniker became sexy, it became desirable, it became encompassing of all sorts of promises. But when you peel the first layer of the onion, you realize that a lot of it is just marketing, and the underlying capabilities are often lacking. What makes capabilities possible is the people that build them. And that would be something that I think oftentimes gets overlooked. If I'm building a sports team, I want the best players so that we can win. I think that applies to this field as well.
Well, we're at time now. Gustavo, I want to thank you very much for sharing these insights and just as importantly, for building a real leader, an important company for our times. And Jamie, thanks for inviting us to be before your conference. I trust everyone is safe and well and going forth to make our world better. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jamie. Have a good one.